On a frigid February afternoon in 2010, the quiet farming village of Kou Shan in northern China was still shaking off the slow rhythm of the Lunar New Year. Fields lay dormant under frost, and most families were just returning to work after days of celebration. That day, a local farmer named Zhang Sheng set out to visit his neighbor Chen Guowei, hoping to rent some farm machinery. It was supposed to be a simple errand, the kind of neighborly exchange that had happened countless times before. But as he drew closer to the Chen family home, Zhang noticed something unsettling. The front door stood wide open. From inside came the muffled sound of weeping, deep, broken sobs that didn't sound like grief from a recent loss, but something darker, older. A strange odor drifted out into the cold air, thick and sour. Zhang covered his nose and stepped inside. The front room was eerily still. No greetings, no movement, only the sound of crying coming from the kitchen. There he found a young couple kneeling on the floor, their faces streaked with tears. But what made Zhang's breath catch was the shape lying beside them. Wrapped in a faded red blanket was a body so far gone in decomposition that the features were no longer recognizable. Police would soon confirm that this was just the beginning. Beneath the kitchen floor, sealed under a layer of crude cement, another body lay hidden. Both victims were elderly, and both had been dead for nearly a year. The question that haunted everyone was simple yet chilling. How could two people vanish inside their own home? And no one noticed until now.
The day the bodies were found, February 18th, 2010, began like any other in Kou Shan Village, a small farming community in Liaoning Province. The Lunar New Year festivities had ended, and villagers were returning to their routines.
When Zhang Sheng entered the Chen household and saw the young couple Chen Liang and his wife Mei Lan crying beside the decayed remains, he tried asking what had happened. But they didn't respond. Something about the silence in that house felt wrong, so Zhang pulled out his phone and called the police. Investigators arrived quickly. In the kitchen, wrapped in a red blanket, lay the body of an older woman. Time had stripped her features, leaving only faint traces of clothing and hair to suggest her identity. Forensic specialists estimated she had been dead for about a year. While combing the scene, officers noticed something unusual, a rough patch of cement near where the first body had been found. The surface was uneven, as if someone with little skill had tried to patch the floor. Cracks spiderwebbed outward. Following instinct, they broke through the cement and uncovered a second body. This one, a man, bore a head wound likely caused by a blunt object. The cause of death for both victims was determined to be mechanical asphyxiation.
DNA testing confirmed the worst. The victims were Chen Guowei and Lu Fang Chen Liang's parents. Both had been well respected in the village. They were known not only for their hard work, but also for their generosity, lending farm equipment, helping struggling neighbors, and even providing small loans without strict repayment demands.
Neighbors told police they occasionally smelled something foul coming from the Chen property over the past year, but with a garbage collection site nearby, they dismissed it as waste odor. No one suspected the truth. Another puzzling detail, Chen Liang and Mei Lan claimed they had been working in the city of Yingkou for over a year. When relatives called to check in, a man claiming to be Chen Guowei answered the phone, but some family members said the voice sounded off. The explanation given: "I've been sick. My voice is different." The Chen home was modest, a single-story house with 2 bedrooms, but stood on valuable farmland. One room appeared unused, the other held personal items and Lunar New Year decorations, including festive red couplets. A few of these had fallen to the floor and been crumpled, leading investigators to suspect the murders happened shortly before Lunar New Year in 2009. Despite the home being empty for a year, there was no sign of forced entry. The front door lock was intact and windows had been shut tight from the inside. This suggested one of 2 possibilities: the killer was someone the victims trusted enough to let in, or someone who already had access. Chen Liang explained to police that he and his wife had returned home unexpectedly for the holiday and were horrified to find his parents' bodies. But when asked why they didn't alert authorities immediately, their answers were vague. Investigators widened the search for information, interviewing extended family. One name stood out: Chen Guoping Liang's uncle. He told police he had long doubted the story about his brother and sister-in-law moving to Sichuan for work. Why would wealthy farmers in their 60s suddenly leave everything behind?
Then came another revelation. Guoping recalled seeing Chen Liang back in the village months earlier selling his father's farm machinery. When Guoping questioned the smell coming from the Chen home, Liang brushed it off as dead rats.
By now, police were beginning to suspect the unthinkable, that the grieving son in front of them might know far more about this crime than he was saying. The oddities surrounding the case only deepened as investigators pieced together the Chen family's recent history. The Sichuan work trip story didn't align with what locals had seen. Chen Guoping's account that his nephew had been back in the village selling off farm machinery suggested the couple's alibi might be fabricated. Police checked employment and residency records in Yingkou, the city where Chen Liang and Mei Lan claimed they had been working. There was no trace of them living or working there in the past year. Instead, they had been staying with Mei Lan's parents in a nearby village close enough to visit the Chen family home whenever they wanted. One of the most telling clues came from phone records. Liang had made several calls to relatives posing as his father, Chen Guowei, but the voice never matched, deepened, slowed, and oddly strained. At the time, relatives accepted the excuse of illness. Now investigators suspected these calls were part of a calculated cover-up to make it seem the parents were still alive. Guoping's testimony also revealed something darker. He had tried to check on his brother after noticing the odor from the Chen home, but Liang had physically blocked him from entering. That, coupled with the sudden liquidation of farm assets, pointed toward a financial motive.
Then came an unexpected tip. A close friend of Mei Lan contacted police saying that months earlier, while drinking, Mei Lan had admitted her husband did something to his parents. At the time, the friend dismissed it as drunken nonsense. But after hearing about the bodies, she felt compelled to come forward.
With this new lead, investigators began discreetly surveilling the couple, hoping to gather more evidence before making an arrest. But before their plan could be put into action, the case took a dramatic turn. One morning, Chen Liang walked into the local police station and confessed. His voice was flat, but his words were chilling. "I killed my parents." He explained that he had been carrying the weight of the crime for over a year, and that it was no longer bearable. At first, police suspected the confession might be an attempt to protect someone else, perhaps his wife. But as he began recounting the events, the level of detail left little doubt. According to Liang, his parents were hardworking farmers who had built a comfortable life, owning several rental houses and lending money to neighbors. He was their only child, born late in their lives after 2 miscarriages, and they spoiled him to the point of dependency. When he married, Mei Lan, tensions erupted almost immediately between her and his mother, Liu Fang. Arguments became daily occurrences. Liang claimed that Mei Lan eventually gave him an ultimatum: either his parents were gone, or she would take their 2 children and leave him forever. For months he said he resisted, but the pressure combined with his fear of losing his family broke something inside him. And on a bitterly cold January day in 2009, the opportunity presented itself. His father stepped out with his grandson, leaving only his mother at home. The rest, Liang told them, happened quickly. Too quickly. Police now had the confession, but the investigation was far from over. They needed to verify every detail, ensure the account matched forensic evidence, and determine the wife's role in what had happened. When Chen Liang began to tell investigators what had happened in the months leading up to the deaths of his parents, his words painted a picture of a household already fractured long before that January day. Liang described growing up as the center of his parents' world. Chen Guowei and Liu Fang had struggled to have children, enduring 2 miscarriages before his birth. When he finally arrived, they vowed to give him everything they never had. And they did. He never had to work on the farm, never had to cook clean or even pour his own tea. Any mistake, whether fighting at school or losing money in a game, was covered up by his parents, often with cash to smooth things over. Over time, Liang came to believe that problems could always be solved if you were willing to pay. In 2002, Guowei and Liu Fang arranged a marriage between Liang and Mei Lan, a young woman from a neighboring village. She arrived with a soft-spoken manner and the reputation of being respectful and hard-working. But according to Liang's account, much of that image was a facade. He alleged that she had a history of gambling,
smoking and keeping company with men outside the marriage. Whether or not these claims were entirely accurate, there was no dispute that her relationship with Liu Fang quickly soured. Arguments erupted over household responsibilities, late nights out, and the time Mei Lan spent away from her children.
According to Liang's confession, the breaking point came when Mei Lan allegedly gave him a choice. Either his parents were removed from the picture, or she would take the children and disappear. Liang told police that he initially dismissed it as a moment of anger, but over time she repeated it, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in front of the children, until it lodged in his mind like a splinter. He claimed she framed it as the only way they could live in peace. And each time she added a reminder: if she left, she would take the children and he would never see them again. January 18th, 2009 was bitterly cold. Liang's father had stepped out with his young grandson to buy snacks, leaving Liu Fang alone at home. Mei Lan, seeing the moment, allegedly told Liang, "Now is your chance." Liang entered his mother's room. She was sitting on the bed preparing New Year's decorations. He hesitated, memories of childhood celebrations flashing through his mind. But when he looked back at Mei Lan standing in the doorway, he said her expression was one of cold insistence. Liang told police he first tried to strangle his mother with his hands. When she struggled, he grabbed a TV cable from the table and looped it around her neck. He claimed the struggle lasted only moments before she went still. When his father returned, Liang hid behind the door with a metal rod. One blow to the back of the head brought him down. Mei Lan, concerned he might still be alive, allegedly took the same TV cable and tightened it around his neck until he stopped breathing. The couple wrapped Liu Fang's body in a red blanket and left it in the kitchen. Liang dug a shallow pit in the floor just large enough to hide his father's body and covered it with cement. Over the following days, they sorted through the house, taking valuables and selling farm equipment. To keep up the illusion that his parents were alive, Liang made phone calls to relatives pretending to be his father. The trips to Sichuan, pure invention. Liang told police that at first he felt relief, the tension in the house was gone, but that soon gave way to crushing guilt. He avoided the family home, unable to face the sight of his parents' belongings. Nights were the worst. He said he often dreamt of them standing at the foot of his bed, eyes wide open. When asked why he came forward, Liang said it was because he could no longer carry the weight. "I thought I was doing it for my family," he told the officers, "but I destroyed the only family I had." The trial of Chen Liang and Mei Lan began in late 2010, drawing crowds from Kou Shan Village and nearby towns. For many locals, the case was not just about a crime, it was about a betrayal that shook their understanding of family itself. Prosecutors laid out a timeline that closely matched Liang's own confession. They presented forensic evidence, the TV cable used in both deaths still bearing fibers from the victim's clothing. DNA matches confirming the bodies were those of Chen Guowei and Liu Fang. Financial records showing the sale of farm equipment shortly after the estimated time of death. Phone records proving Liang had called relatives pretending to be his father. Witnesses testified as well. Chen Guoping, Liang's uncle, recounted being turned away from the Chen home and smelling decay. A neighbor confirmed that Mei Lan had told her while drinking that Liang did something to his parents. Liang's defense did not dispute that he caused the deaths, but argued for mitigation, citing long-term family conflict and emotional pressure. They painted a portrait of a man torn between loyalty to his parents and fear of losing his wife and children.
Mei Lan's defense was more combative. Her attorney emphasized that there was no direct physical evidence proving she participated in the killings. They argued that Liang's claims about her influence were self-serving and uncorroborated, and that any statements she made in anger were not genuine instructions.
Throughout the trial, Liang appeared subdued, speaking only when directly questioned. When asked if he regretted his actions, he answered quietly, "Every day." Mei Lan, in contrast, maintained a composed demeanor, denying any role in planning or committing the crimes. After deliberation, the court delivered its judgment. Chen Liang was found guilty of intentional homicide and sentenced to death. Mei Lan was found guilty of intentional homicide as an accomplice and received a death sentence with a 2-year suspension, a term that under Chinese law could be commuted to life imprisonment if no further crimes were committed during that period. The presiding judge emphasized that the crimes were particularly cruel and the motive deeply rooted in personal greed and disregard for human life. The sentencing stirred mixed reactions. Some villagers believed justice had been served, noting the calculated nature of the killings and the prolonged cover-up. Others, while condemning the crime, expressed sorrow for the two young children left behind now without parents or grandparents. The case also sparked discussions about the limits of marital loyalty, the effects of overindulgent parenting, and the hidden pressures that can escalate family disputes into tragedy. The courtroom verdict marked the legal end of the case, but for Kou Shan Village the wounds remained open. Two respected elders were gone. Two young children would grow up without the people who had loved them most, and the community was left grappling with a question that has no easy answer. How could something like this happen within a family that on the surface seemed so stable? Many in the village reflected on how Chen Guowei and Lu Fang had raised their only son. They were admired for their generosity, but some neighbors now wondered whether their unwavering indulgence had unintentionally planted the seeds of dependency. Chen Liang, by his own admission, had grown up believing that his parents' protection and their resources were endless. This wasn't just a story about crime. It was a cautionary tale about boundaries, accountability, and the silent buildup of resentment inside a household. When those tensions are left to grow unchecked, they can warp relationships beyond recognition. The trial also drew attention to the destructive potential of marital manipulation. Whether or not every allegation about Mei Lan's influence was true, the case highlighted how emotional pressure, ultimatums, and threats can push already vulnerable individuals toward irreversible choices. Psychologists interviewed by local media noted that individuals raised without strong conflict resolution skills may resort to extreme actions when cornered. Liang's decision, as he told police, was not born in a single moment, but in years of unresolved tension, emotional dependence, and fear of loss. For months after the sentencing, newspapers, radio programs, and online forums debated the moral and social dimensions of the case. Was this solely a story of greed and cruelty? Or was it also a story about a man shaped and perhaps broken by the very people he betrayed? Villagers spoke of the eerie quiet that had settled over the Chen property. The once bustling home now stood empty, a silent reminder of how quickly warmth can turn to coldness. Cases like this, while rare, force us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature. Love can be twisted by fear. Loyalty can be replaced by self-preservation. And sometimes the people we expect to protect us are the ones who cause the deepest harm. As an investigative storyteller, I can't help but think about the moments before it all happened. A father walking home with his grandson, a mother arranging festive decorations, unaware that their lives were about to be cut short. These were ordinary acts in an ordinary day, until they weren't. And I wonder if someone had stepped in earlier, could this chain of events have been broken? The Chen family tragedy is not just a crime story, it's a mirror. It reflects the fragility of trust, the dangers of letting resentment fester, and the devastating consequences of choices made in fear or anger. In the end, 2 lives were taken, 2 more were destroyed, and an entire community was left questioning the signs they missed. So I'll leave you with this. If you were caught between loyalty to your parents and the demands of a spouse, both pulling you in opposite directions, how far would you go to keep your family together? And where would you draw the line?